This episode is sponsored by Property Filter. Find great deals faster.
Hello and welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. This podcast is designed by real people on their journey to achieving financial freedom, and we'll focus on people who've either already attained it, who are joining us on that journey, or maybe a specialist topic that can help you build your technical knowledge to achieving and maintaining that financial freedom. We hope you enjoy it. Hi folks, and welcome back to the Financial Freedom Podcast. Today on the show, we're going to be having one of our technical area discussions, where we're going to be discussing one of the things that's certainly in Greater Manchester and some of the major cities around the country is becoming a talking point, which is the introduction of Article 4. So Article 4 directions, and we're going to be talking about it specifically where it removes permitted development rights for property developers who want to change the use of properties from a C3 class, which is the planning class, to a C4 class. Now, as always in our technical discussions, I'm joined by my business partner, Tim Witt. Hi, Tim.
Hello. Thanks for having me again.
So obviously this is something that is impact. So we started.
Well, it's greatly impacting Greater Manchester at the moment.
Yeah, it's greatly impacting. So there's 11 major towns in and around the Greater Manchester area. We started our business, there was 2.5 areas that had Article 4, and now there is 9 of 11 that have announced it, and probably by the end of, we're in 2025 now, so by the end of 2026, you'd have thought all areas. And then there's some other towns like, close by as well, that have also announced it. So it's becoming a big thing. So, do you want to kick off the questions?
Yeah. So firstly, I want you to explain in layman's terms what an Article 4 direction is.
Okay.
And what it is, what its effect is, or how it is involved with HMO developments, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so Article 4 is a legal term. The Article 4 gives a local authority the power to remove or restrict something which would normally be fall under the General Permitted Development Order, the GDPO.
Yeah, under the National Planning Framework.
On the National Planning Policy Framework, correct? Under the NPPF. Now, we talk about it regularly about the C3 to C4, which I'll explain that in a second, but it also can be used for many, many other things. It's used in many conservation zones, so it can be buildings of interest. It can be used in lots of these things. So let's say you've got a conservation zone, and you've got, in that conservation zone, maybe you have to follow certain rules and regulations about the way that properties are developed. But then there might be an Article 4 over certain areas within that conservation zone where you might not be allowed to put in, dormers or roof lights or that type of stuff. It might be completely restricted.
Stuff that's traditionally permitted development in other areries.
Yeah, exactly. So it's no longer you have to use these materials. You physically and fundamentally can't do it. Now, when the General Permitted Development Order was updated to include the change of use from a C3 class house to a C4 class house, what that did was create I think it was in the 90s, was it late 90s? I'm
not sure when it originally.
Yeah. It was brought in, and what it meant was that no, it can't be 90s. It must be later than that. I'm still thinking I'm 25 years old. So no, it must be way later than that. So, but when it was brought in, a C3 class is a house, right, or a flat.
Yeah,
dwelling house is the technical term. It's you would class it as something that you would normally reside.
A terrace house, a semi-detached house, a bungalow, a flat,
all of the above.
That.
Maisonettes, any of those types of things that but it's
as a couple or a family or whatever in it is a C3 house.
Yeah, so if it's people who are related and or it's for one singular use under a traditional way, it's classed as a dwelling house. Now C4 is 3 or more unrelated people occupying that property. So up to 6 unrelated people occupying that property. So what that meant was that you could put in 3 people, up to 6 people who may occupy all or part of the house on either a singular or an AST or multiple ASTs, and you could rent out the parts of the house. So like if it was a 3-bed flat, you've got 3 rooms, you could rent out each room. And that would still be classed as a C4 property. So it's called a small HMO. It's occupants. So it's up to 6 occupants that you can do between 3 and 6. If it's 2 people sharing a flat, it doesn't qualify as a C4. It's still C3. Well, it's a great area as well. I don't understand why it isn't. But it was brought in, and the reason it was brought in was, to free up some of the planning side of things, and to, it was just a normal thing that people did, student houses, that kind of stuff. What's happened since then is that HMOs have become a more tangible part of the supply chain of the housing in the UK, especially since the interest rate rises in 2020, 2021.
Yeah, I think because of the cost of living crisis and things in general.
Yeah.
HMOs, even being a very high quality HMO, it's still quite affordable compared to other housing.
Yeah.
Even compared to renting a flat or a house and things like
Yeah.
that.
So traditionally, if you're moving into your first dwelling house and you are a couple and you are renting, and your total costs, including all taxes, bills, and all that type of stuff, is £1,300. If you're a single person, you might be able to rent something at £650 to £700. Right. That's the supply chain position generally. If you're a student and you're on there for a year, you might need a room for a year. If there's a social contract where they're trying to have some service user groups, there might be rooms for those types of people. Yeah. So they have multiple uses. What's interesting is the licensing impact came in around 10 years ago. So they started to really drill down into safety for these elements as well.
Yeah.
And with that came landlords declaring the use of these things. To say how many there is in the town, and it was underestimated, I think, initially in terms of how many there was in each particular town.
Yeah, because it just wasn't known, it wasn't really recorded anywhere.
You didn't need to tell anyone. Yeah. You could just, A, it was, you had some permitted development rights, and B, before that, nobody knew it was a different use class anyway. There was no planning enforcement or any of those types of things. But now, where we have this sort of like cost of living crisis, this increase in population, this net immigration issue, this, we've got all of this required housing and an increase in interest rates, which has made a lot of buy-to-let developments not work as well. A lot of investors have turned towards C4 developments because you can
it's
sweat the asset
multiple income streams, and it's a bit more protected.
It's a very tangible, very tangible investment program.
And on the flip side, because of the demographic of the country and the population growth and the lack of housing, all those sort of things, there's there still is very, very big demand for it.
So Article 4 has been imposed in numerous places up and down the country, and including now what will be the majority of the Greater Manchester County. So, and that Article 4 direction is restricting that right. It's not stopping necessarily people from doing it. It's just that it's now no longer permitted. You have to go through planning, and that's
very
the reason
important
for
point there. So and the reason we're talking about today is because recently we've had, say, Bolton Council, Tameside Council have brought in Article 4 directions immediately for HMO developments, the C4, and also there's talk in pretty much all of the others that they're going to
they're all going to go by the end of 26.
I think Oldham Council said early next year, didn't they? January next year. So so it's very, very prevalent here.
So I'm going to ask you a question. What are the positives of an Article 4 direction for a community, first of all, and then we'll move on to the positives for somebody who's maybe an investor developer?
Yes, I think for a community generally, it's the Article 4 direction coming in means that there's a bit more control on the area. So, let's say whether it's a professional HMO, a student HMO, a HMO that's housing, social housing, or a HMO that's housing asylum seekers or whatever, by bringing in the Article 4 direction, the public and the community have some sort of say in HMO, conversions from, say, a C3 house to a HMO, because it has to go through the planning process. So there's public consultation involved. There's general checks that have to be done, regardless of the public consultation, because it's in planning. Things like checking noise requirements, waste management, parking, flood, etc., etc. So there's more checks that are happening on that development. And also the public have a right to object to it. From a community perspective.
So and on that, like, we've been added to a few WhatsApp groups, the classic WhatsApp group where people who are trying to do developments in certain areas are maybe having some challenges. And what surprised me, obviously we do things over standards as a standard, right? We want to build big,
we do high end, high quality.
Is the number of things where developers are being caught out, or property owners are being caught out, where they've designed something that just isn't to the standard.
We've looked at some, haven't we, that don't comply with like basic licensing requirements as an example.
But it might meet licensing but not planning as well, and I think that's a good point.
It might not have, might not even show waste management or thought about waste management as an example, or cycle. The council's have requirements for for cycle storage and things like that, and it might not show that, and it's like you didn't have to do that before because it's permitted, but now you are going through the planning framework.
And I guess from a permitted point of view, you don't have to be as stringent because you just need to get the license officer to agree. I mean, the greatest will in the world, their standards are quite basic. They're not of any sort of like high degree. So the planning office is it's more well trained in what good looks like. It's no bad thing from a community perspective to have those people. And also, if you're looking at the reasons quoted about Article 4 directions being brought in, from a community perspective, it's not necessarily targeted at the good ones. You know, quite often when they're brought in, the councillors are saying it's against things like slum landlords and so on and so forth. Because the problem with HMOs is it's got quite a bad connotation in terms of a term, right? So we do the higher end. We try and call it like a co-living or shared
professional
shared living or
end,
professional shared living or whatever it is. But ultimately, from a planning class perspective, it is a HMO. So when we put anything forward, it has to say the word a house of multiple occupation in it, and that obviously sets people up. And this is where you have, maybe my impression of this is you standard, you know, barely laid out property, you know, they've barely done any renovatory works, just about meeting license standard with some fire doors. No one's checked the actual fire. They're not coming in and punching holes in the walls or whatever.
Yeah, and because
maybe it's 4 beds, maybe it's a small terraced house, it's got a poxy little kitchen, and you've just got like sweating that asset by putting people in there.
Well, there might be some investors that they haven't had a mortgage, so they've just done it. They put people in it. They haven't got a license, and because they haven't needed planning approval, haven't had to do it. So there's no risk of planning enforcement. Whereas with the, in the future, that gets restricted, because if someone does that, planning enforcement can come in and close it down and give them fines and things like that.
They won't be able to raise finance against it without being able to prove that planning is there or thereabouts. And mandatory licensing only hits in from 5 as well, 5 and above. So, but look, before that, the term is you should be engineering as 2 licensed standards, but there's no checks and balances on that that area. So if there's no licensing involvement, no way for a tenant to complain, no way for a community to complain, then 100% I totally agree that Article 4 is a great thing. So, but why is it a benefit for a developer or an investor?
So the reason why it's a benefit for a property developer is that if you develop a HMO in an Article 4 zone, there's an extra barrier to entry, which is you need planning permission. So like you said before, if you're doing a 5 or 6 occupant HMO, you now need planning approval. And what that means is that if you develop in that area, or you've already got a property in that area, the asset's kind of protected in a way, because you can't have someone the next day just come and just convert the whole street into 5 and 6 bed HMOs without getting planning approval. They have to go through the planning process. And if the planning policy is that we can only have X amount percentage on that street of HMOs, that your asset's just protected on that street, because you're never going to get more than, say, 10% HMOs on that street if that's the policy. So so your asset's really protected now and for the long term. And, that helps the value in the long term because of its protection. B, because it's an extra barrier to entry in that area to do a HMO conversion, the chance of getting an oversupply is much lower. So, if you got HMOs in those areas, for now and for the long term, it's going to be easier to fill the rooms and things like that, because there won't be an oversupply necessarily.
And the population continues to increase. And I actually think that, and ChatGPT agrees with me, so it must be true. Is that because of the additional regulation in licensing, the additional regulation in planning, that the number of HMO rooms nationally will start to decrease.
So the new HMOs coming online is getting less and less, because less people are developing. It's a higher barrier to entry because you need planning approval and, like you said, regulations, there's EPC requirements, all these sort of things. So that slows down. But then, like you said, if the population is still growing, the demand's still going up, but the supply is going down. So
if you looked at it from a pure population supply and demand perspective, an Article 4 direction, if you've already got a property or you get planning permission for a property, you would think it becomes more valuable.
Definitely.
Less people can do it.
And that's reflected in valuation surveyors' reports and sales comparables. They show that in the Article 4 zones, they sell for higher prices.
It also opens up more lenders.
Yeah.
If you want to mortgage property, because some lenders because they know that as well. Some lenders only want to do Article 4.
That's a good point.
Properties, so you might be able to get you more competitive rates. So rental increases. If there's less of it, and yours is one of the good ones. Well, even if yours is one of the bad ones, the margin's going to.
You're going to have sharper rental growth, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Stop the podcast now. This episode is sponsored by Property Filter. Property Filter is the #1 property tool for today's property professional. It brings in all the data points and sources from all the property portals and auction sites into one convenient place.
Then you have the option to overlay all the clever strategies found in the property filter blueprint to find motivated sellers faster. Now, we use it on a daily basis. It saves us over 80% of our time when looking for properties. And if that sounds like something that you want in your lives, please go to register.property-filter.co.uk/PPB, which is the discount code for this podcast. You will get 2 weeks free and a discount on your first month. That's it from me. Back to the podcast.
I'll flip it back the other way then. So what are some of the potential negative effects of Article 4 direction to a community? And so we'll start with the community aspect.
Yeah, so this comes down to how the Article 4 direction is managed.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's an Article 4 direction, hell no HMO, that is a massive negative for a community. And the reason for that is actually looking at it from all the positives that you said, because it crystallizes all of the ones that are already in existence. So if you are living on a street with a HMO today, and the policy Article 4 is brought in, and the council just turn around and say we're not doing it anymore, or everyone that gets applied for gets thrown out, regardless of policy, and this does happen. It does happen.
Yeah.
Then all it does is it crystallizes that one on the street. So if you're not incentivized as an average landlord, not a good landlord, but an average landlord, to maintain your property to any great standard, and you're not going to do that. You're going to reap the benefits, not the and
but also, regardless of maintenance, you're going to get you're going to get no new developed HMOs. So even if you're a good landlord, you maintain it really, really well, you stay at the top of that area because no new ones are coming on board. But that's still not going to be as nice as like newly developed ones in other
exactly.
areas.
So the competition part of it also, like you said, decreases. So at the moment, what we've seen over the last few years is, there's been an increase in HMOs generally, but the quality is also increased. So people are putting purpose-built, nice shared living accommodation on the street. So they're doing that. If they can't do that, then the property density remains what it is. So if you're not increasing good quality competition, then you're not competing out the bad quality as well. So
the poor stuff isn't dropping out the bottom of the market.
So if you're trying to attract people to your town, let's say, because the first step to anybody moving to a new town or location is normally either a flat or a HMO room, normally, if they're moving for a job or work or whatever sort of things, then you're going to be restricted on the accommodation that you can bring in. So those people, and there's a
and the economic activity that goes with it, in a way. So if you're stopping bringing in new people in that area, like you said, young working professionals or whatever, the other businesses in that area are gonna lose out as well.
So they won't be able to find affordable accommodation. They'll look to other cities and towns. All of those types of things are gonna negatively affect
the community
as a community. So, what the best way to manage an Article 4 direction in this perspective, and this is obviously a biased opinion. I have to say, it's because we develop HMOs, right? So it is a biased opinion. Is to have some set policies on things like density, things like adjacency, so you're not sandwiching houses, but have a good housing mix in line with a national planning policy framework. So if good quality, well thought out, strategically positioned from a location point of view, HMOs are proposed, that those proposals are supported to keep the good competition going. And let's not forget that a lot of the good ones are turning around not only the fortunes of a property that is probably seen better days, but they're increasing the quality of the standard accommodation generally on the area and on that street. Because all of a sudden you've got high-end accommodation on the street, whereas it might have been a lower end street before. So, and that's the one thing is, we need to keep family houses. Some of the houses we develop have got one or no people in them, right? So you open the door and go, hello family, you there? And there's nobody there.
There's one that we're about to buy for a client that's a massive property. It's been vacant for 10 years. So not only is no one just moved out or like there's one person, it's a huge property that's been vacant.
It's got no use. It's got no use right now. So so from a community perspective,
and I think the other thing, just to finish on that, is I was just thinking about it. The other way that a council could look at it, because you said density. But if there's a metric to actually look at supply and demand in the area, that would be very useful, help, wouldn't it? Because there's actually loads of streets that you could probably fill every second house with a HMO, and it would still there'd still be demand for those
Yeah,
rooms. Not everywhere, obviously. It depends on location. But if the council actually had a metric to actually assess supply and demand in the area, they could more accurately go, right, there is space for these HMOs to be developed. So
it's a good question. It's a good point, because I was looking at Salford region M5, because we've just taken on a property there recently, and I was doing a demographic analysis there. And there was 60, I think 65-ish rooms available of varying quality, from the worst to the best. So this is really close to both Salford Town Centre and Manchester Town Centre. It's that bridging between where the two cities collide. And I was looking at the density, and there was, and I was chatting to somebody on a Teams, and they were saying, "Oh, I'm really worried about how come there's 64 rooms available?" I was like, if you just looked at it from a black and white perspective, it seems high. So we'll just wait 1 second. So I'll log into spare room, and I click it to rooms wanted, 1,000 plus. So there's 1,000 plus rooms wanted, and then I drill down further to rooms that postcode, nearly 500.
Yeah.
So you've got a 1 in 5.
And that's my point of supply and demand.
Yeah, you've got a 1 in 5 to 8 chance of getting a room. So the supply there is well undersupplied.
Yep.
So if you're going to stop that from happening, then all that's going to happen is you're going to stop people from being able to move there for the purpose that they wanted to move there for, right?
Yeah, and it stops like you said, landlords upping their game in a way and having good quality, because
it just crystallizes the bad ones.
Because if you've got really bad ones, they'll still end up renting out. So the landlord's not incentivized.
Good development at the top end pushes out the ones at the bottom end. The ones that they, I've had it for 15 years now. It's getting harder to fill my rooms. I've not really maintained it. I'm just going to sell it on to the next person, and then they can get it back in the economic cycle. That might still happen, but if you're not getting any competition at the top end, I'm not having any problems filling my rooms, not really having to spend too much on it, probably going to hold on to it a bit longer. Right? So it does kill that cycle.
And then negative effects for property investors and developers. What are the negative effects you see for Article 4 directions?
So obviously we've seen a couple with immediate effect. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, that's harsh, isn't it?
Yeah, so I get why they might want to bring that in, but without transitional arrangements, it just doesn't. It completely says to the investment community, to the developer community, we are not open for business.
Yeah,
from a developer.
I think 9 or 12 months is fair.
Yeah, even 6 months.
6 is borderline, isn't it? Because depending on the size of your project, you might have just started on site and it comes in.
Yeah, well, it is, but
9 to 12 months, yeah.
Yeah, but we're talking about C3 to C4 here.
Yeah.
See, project size is maximum 6 occupants.
Yeah.
Right, so you're looking at 20 weeks, aren't you? Generally speaking,
should be well managed with a good team and stuff. Don't forget the people that are disorganized. And
even if it's 26 weeks from the first moment that they announce they're going to do it to then bringing it in, giving the notice for 6 months, that's way over the timeline.
Yeah.
So that makes total sense to me. But bringing it in overnight, what you're potentially saying to people is, we don't know why we're doing this. We're guessing it's a problem. Going to bring it in immediately and screw you and everyone else, right? And that is, to me, is a very negative message to send out to an investment community. Because if you're thinking about doing anything, because one of the local authorities used Article 4 for prior approval on flats recently as well. And I was like, well, if you're that town who does things immediately without notice,
who's going to want to invest?
Who's going to want to invest in your area? Who's going to bring those properties back to life? Because it isn't your first time buyers aren't going to spend 40 grand bringing a property back to life. They're not. So you're going to have this real sort of issue of aging stock that's not really usable by the population. It also is unfair, because if you've got a 20-week project and you're on week 7 or 8 and you passed first fix, what are you going to do? You can stop works, but you've got a real significant cost problem then, and then you've got to start applying for planning and that kind of thing. And so when that happens, that's a big problem. The other problems then come when you've got a really well thought out scheme and you're happy to apply for planning, and then due to political sentiment, more than anything, it just gets the planning officers
have, they are political, aren't they?
Yeah, well, planning officers might say yes. So they might say, we support this application and would recommend for approval. And then councillors who don't understand policy or vote it away, based on sentiment.
And that's especially unfair when they had permitted development rights that got removed.
Oh, yeah, I saw one recently, right? So one in Bolton had permitted development rights, put forward a well thought out scheme with ensuite rooms to a reasonably high standard. The decision was to recommend for approval from the planning office perspective, and they rejected it based on a list of holistic things that was more in line with, maybe a shared social house or asylum seekers, that kind of thing, which I totally understand that might be a concern for a neighbourhood. That's not what they were developing. Theirs was a good quality design. And I was like, well,
So
hopefully
they've
already finished this.
Hopefully
as well.
that
It really made me
win.
cross
Hopefully that win on appeal.
Yeah.
However, it's really unfair that A, it's even had to go for planning application.
Yeah.
B, it's had to get rejected. Well,
Yeah,
it got rejected at committee, and then C, they've got to spend all that time and money to go to committee. It's really, really unfair.
So obviously the immediacy.
Obviously, we're seeing it from our perspective
Yeah,
as
of
a
course,
developer, aren't we? But what?
But there's also the misconception as well, which is, what is the community part of this? So it's nobody wants it on the street. Like it's going to ruin everyone's life. Like all of a sudden this, there's just going to be like some kind of.
Well, we've got a
weird
street where
house.
we've developed for someone recently, and the neighbours have been horrible about it being a HMO, which was permitted. And we got to the end of the project. We tenanted with some really nice, young professionals, that we usually do.
Yeah.
And one of the neighbors has been horrible, actually walked out and apologized to our project manager, saying, I'm really sorry for what I've been saying and everything. I've met the house. I've gone and introduced myself to the tenants, and they're all lovely people.
Yeah.
It's completely different to what I thought.
They're helping us out with stuff. They're contributing to the community.
Yeah.
So
it's a big misconception for a lot. But
yeah, it is. That part is nonsense. But that separately to that, what are the negatives? So separately to the immediacy of it, the second part of the negative is that it's difficult to forecast. It's difficult to budget.
You can't necessarily plan for something that just gets voted in by the council.
Yeah. Especially on a sort of especially on that level of that 5 and 6 bed level, which is the terrace, the terrace or semi house to HMO. I think that becomes much, much more challenging.
Yeah.
Because you're taking bigger risks because of that,
sentiment. The other thing I think that could happen is that because a lot of lenders that lend on those, C4 HMOs, they might see what's happening in Greater Manchester and pull their products to the rest of the country.
Yeah.
So that will stop developments in the rest of the country because they'll go, it's too much of a risk. I can't afford that. Councils can just take away those rights, and we've got a risk with our money. So I think that's that's
a real risk. The availability of finance for good development is going to be challenging, and it is a mad thing.
Whereas
and that's all down to the immediacy, though. That's got nothing to do with that before.
If they just have that 9 or 12 month transition period, that would solve that straight away.
Totally. So development finance available in your town is going to be limited. And potentially limited in other towns based on a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
So any other negatives for it? I just don't think there's many more negatives. Obviously, the biggest negative is you can't just go and do something, right? So
you lose the fluency. So the negative is that instead of just finding something and starting the works, you then have the extra implication.
Yeah, but is that worse than having a solid crystallized product? I don't think that negative is outweighed by the other one. And the reason that people like doing the non-planning one is because of the planning risk, which I totally understand as per all the points that we've just discussed. But the reality of that is it what's a bigger risk? Getting planning or getting planning rejected, or somebody putting a better HMO on either side of your HMO.
That's true. A lot of people may not have realized that, but a lot of investors have gone the 5 and 6 bed because of there's no planning risk. They're worried about planning risk. They hear horror stories or whatever, so they sleep better at night. So it might kill off a bit of the market of those investors that want to invest in say HMOs.
Yeah, but that from somebody who continues is a benefit. And the benefit, I think, on that, if you're then going to go and do bigger and better stuff, the market will be better, right? The market will be better for you. So is that your next question? Opportunities. All right, yeah. What opportunities? Well, let's talk about that then. So what opportunities does Ask for Direction bring in for property investors developers?
Well, that's what you're starting to touch on there is that I think generally, and I started talking about it there, was that, your traditional investor that, wanted to do a 5 or 6 bed HMO because it doesn't need planning, they potentially disappear, or they've got to go to the next level in a way. So because the barrier to entry is that extra bit higher, it will remove a certain amount of investors or reduce the amount of investors that will want to do those conversions because it's an extra level of expertise required and risk and things like that. Like you said, there's other risks that they may not have considered.
Well, the 5 and 6 bed guys are probably not going to be the same people who are going to do the 7 to 11 bed anyway, right? Unless they're willing to, up the game.
Yeah, so the opportunity is generally, I think there's going to be less investors wanting to develop HMOs because it's that extra layer of entry and difficulty and things like that. So that means the people that do stay in the game, there's going to be less competition, A, for finding the deals, and B, when you are owning those properties and renting them out, there's going to be less supply again, so your rents might be able to push up. It's not great news for tenants, really, is it? Because for all those sort of reasons, because it's just going to be massively reduced stock. So the opportunities are more for the developers that stay in the game and are professional. So it's a little bit like all the regulation that comes in. We've talked about it with renters' rights bill, like it's an extra layer of complexity. It's a bit harder. So the professional, agency or management company, it's a bit of an opportunity, but for someone that's self-managing, it's a lot more difficult than it used to be.
I think the opportunity is to get a little bit more bang for your bucks there as well, isn't it? Because if you're developing at the moment, you're probably developing to hold, but if you get a good one at the minute, you could probably develop to sell, because it's going to be yield compression, I would have thought.
Yeah, so what you're saying,
maybe not immediately, but
because less people are developing them, you could develop to sell, because you could sell it on to another investor for quite a good price, because you've gone through the planning, the development, the build aspect, and everything.
Yeah, and because there's less competition in the actual product, it's more crystallized as a product. You're going to have this position of yield compression, which is if there's less of something, the more value it can bring to you if you hold that thing. Same as a Bitcoin or a gold bar or a diamond or any of those things, right? So because it's restricted in its availability and it's got a good use. So this generates a lot of cash. You might be, the yields will probably start to tumble. So a 13% yield area might become 12, a 12 might become 11, 11 might become 10.
Yeah.
And you probably get a few more.
Which means the value of your property is going up, because there's.
And I think there's still opportunity for those that understand that to do some asset management of existing ones as well.
Yes.
So because if you buy something now for like 12%, but plan for that to be 11% in a year's time.
That combines with the other issues we've talked about. So like HMO landlords that might have had the properties for a while or whatever, they're a bit tired because of
regulations increasing, licensing's coming up.
Yeah, all these regulation increases, EPC.
Need to get a lawful certificate, pay for lawful certificate.
Need to get a lawful certificate, all these sort of things. They might just go, well, I'll just sell it. I've had a lot of growth in the last 20 years. I'm happy with X price, just to have it off my hands. Investor comes and gets it for quite a reasonable price, then can add value through a refurbishment, upgrade, and stuff like that. And so there are
definitely
good opportunities for that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so Article 4, friend or foe, final.
It's not a yes or no, is it?
It's not yes or no, is it?
Friend or foe, it's a bit of both, but I think ultimately, long term, if you're a good professional investor, there's good opportunities there.
Yeah, friend if you own one, friend if you've got a council that has a good policy.
Yeah.
Friend if you are a professional landlord,
you've got a good team around you,
and you have a good team around you.
Understand planning.
Foe if you a friend if you're trying to sell something because you get yield compression. Foe if all you want to do is non-planning related items.
Yeah.
And foe
if you're halfway through a development and council brought it in.
And foe if your local authority are just hell no HMO.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to have a conversation about the differences between.
So it's about 6 or 7 friends there and about 3 foes.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe
slightly more friend than foe.
Even for the developer.
I think that's fair.
Yep.
Cool. Lovely.
Excellent.
All right. Article 4, friend or foe. Thanks very much for joining us once again. If you haven't liked, subscribed, or turned your notifications on for this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to this, please go ahead and do so. That'll keep you up to date with the newest episodes. Until the next time, thanks, Tim. And bye for now.
Till the next one.
Thank you once again for joining us on the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. If you want to get in touch with us about today's podcast or any of the learning topics that we've gone through today, you can email us at podcast@invest-prop.co.uk or get in touch with us with whichever your social media platform of choice is. If you think you would add value to us as a guest on this podcast, you can please get in touch and let us know what you would be able to talk to us about. Other than that, we wish you well on your financial freedom journeys. And once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.